In 1378, one of the greatest wars between Venice and Genoa began, the War of Chioggia. The Genoese fleet advanced far enough to directly threaten Venice itself. But Venice refused to surrender and prepared for a final massive counterattack. In the end, Venice emerged victorious at Chioggia, and the balance of the Mediterranean shifted once again. After the War of Chioggia, Genoa struggled to maintain its former power. Political rivalries and economic troubles slowly weakened the city from within. Venice, however, survived thanks to its stronger and more organized state structure. But the true rising power in the Mediterranean was no longer Venice or Genoa. It was the Ottomans. By the late 14th century, the Ottomans were advancing rapidly through the Balkans. Meanwhile, the Byzantine Empire continued to shrink, leaving Constantinople increasingly isolated. Venice grew deeply concerned about Ottoman influence in the Aegean and Eastern Mediterranean. Genoa continued building cautious relations with the Ottomans in order to protect its trade. By the 15th century, Constantinople was far from its former glory. The once great empire now survived only around its capital. Venetian and Genoese merchants still dominated much of the city's trade. Meanwhile, the Ottoman state was growing stronger with every passing year. In 1451, the young Sultan Mehmed II ascended to the throne. The new Sultan immediately began preparations to conquer Constantinople. Massive cannons were forged as the Ottomans moved to control the Bosphorus. Constantinople knew that a great siege was approaching. In the spring of 1453, the Ottoman army arrived before the walls of Constantinople. Inside the city, the defenders prepared for their final great resistance. The Genoese commander, Giovanni Giustiniani, became one of the key figures in the defense. Venetian and Genoese fighters also joined the defense of the city. For days, Ottoman cannons relentlessly bombarded the walls of Constantinople. The defenders struggled through the nights to repair the shattered walls. But the move that changed the fate of the siege was the transport of Ottoman ships over land. The arrival of the Ottoman fleet and the Golden Horn shocked the entire city. On the morning of May 29, 1453, the Ottoman army launched its final assault. The defenders resisted on the walls until the very last moment. The severe wounding of Giovanni Giustiniani shook the balance of the defense. And at last, the walls of Constantinople were breached. As Constantinople fell, chaos spread throughout the city. The young Sultan Mehmed II had opened the gates to a new era. The Genoese colony of Galata had now fallen under Ottoman rule as well. 1453 marked not only the end of Byzantium, but the end of the old Mediterranean order itself. Constantinople was now the new capital of the Ottoman Empire. For Venice and Genoa, the balance of power in the Mediterranean had completely changed. The search for new trade routes would soon push Europe toward distant seas. The centuries-long rivalry between Venice and Genoa had given way to a new age shaped by Ottoman power. The maritime republics that once dominated the Mediterranean were now losing their former power. Trade routes were changing, and new empires were rising. After 1453, the Mediterranean world would never be the same again. But when the city fell to the Ottomans in 1453, both Venice and Genoa saw the end of the old world. There was no longer Constantinople, but Istanbul.